Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Melissa Goodstein, and I am the immediate past president of NYACP and a member of the board. And I'm thrilled today to continue my collaborative chat series with Tony Markus, who is from the firm Markus and Sheridan. And Tony has been a longstanding he practices in collaborative for a really long time, has been a member for a real long time, and is a board member as well of NYCP. I think you're into your second year. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm really thrilled that you're joining us today, Tony, so that our members and the public at large can learn a little bit more about you and why you practice collaboratively and just to learn a little bit more and connect with you.
Absolutely. Happy to be
Yeah.
here. Thank you for inviting me, Melissa.
Oh,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
Hello,
So
everybody.
yes. So tell me, Tony, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Riverdale section of the Bronx,
Oh,
which is,
okay.
and it was a good combination of being within the city of New York. So you had access to mass transit, such as, public buses and also subways and a bus to Manhattan, but still in a more kind of suburban like setting, areas. So it was a nice upbringing, and it was somewhat eclectic in terms of diversity, which was
Yeah,
which was also, I didn't know how wonderful that was, but at the time, because it was all I pretty much knew, but it was there
right.
as well. So
That is nice. It's a great park there. The Wave Hill, is it Wave?
Wave Hill, yes, down
Yeah,
towards the river. Yes, they used to, when
yeah.
I was in elementary school, they used to take us to Wave Hill for, field trips and,
It's a lovely park. Yeah,
very
it's
nice.
really, really, really
Yeah, it's a
nice.
wonderful
Yeah,
place. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
Good
Yeah,
memory. That's right.
well, my parents grew up in the Bronx, but not in that part. But my sister lived in Riverdale off of Capox Street.
K-pop.
Is
Yeah.
Capox, yeah, yeah. You see, yeah. Anyway. Well,
Hmm.
that's lovely. And do you have any siblings?
I do. I have one sibling,
Okay.
a sister, Melinda,
Oh,
a little bit older than me. And yep. And
yeah.
she actually returned. She used to live in Ardsley, and now she's returning back to Riverdale. So I get to
Really?
go there and kind of, remember that I used to live here. So,
That's right. Well, that is nice. And
yeah.
so, Tony, how did you get involved in collaborative divorce and matrimonial practice?
In collaborative divorce, I mean,
Well, even just the field that you're in, even as an attorney, like
matrimonial, well,
yeah, and what
right.
motivated you to become an attorney and then focus on, you do a
Yeah.
lot of different things. Your focus, which is interesting, is not just matrimonial and family. Your practice is more expansive. So just,
Somewhat more, yeah. I
yeah.
do that in estate work, and we do a little bit of corporate work. My partner, Mark Sheridan, does a lot of employment and business work and a lot of mediation. But yes, we have a focus, but there are a lot of things we don't do. But matrimonial was just, I used to be involved when I first started practicing, I did a fair amount of litigation, and was more in the commercial field, and I decided that it didn't really resonate with me. So I decided I would get involved in matrimonial. I had an opportunity to work for a matrimonial firm and got my training there, and then ended up in two different private firms doing matrimonial work, and then opened up my own practice, and just thought that even though people had this idea to have a matrimonial attorney being kind of not a nice person, if you will, I felt that it was meaningful work, and
Yeah.
it kind of resonated with me in terms of it being important work to do, and kind
Mm,
of was a nice hybrid for me to kind of balance my human interests of people's personal matters as opposed to dealing with the corporate interests. So that's what
right.
brought me into it. It's very different law, quote unquote, law practice than many other types of practices that lawyers engage in.
Right.
And then collaborative is something that to ask the second part of your question, or
Yeah.
the other part of your question is, yeah, I mean, I was trained to be a litigator, or to pretty much separate myself from the emotions of divorce, even though it was something I was interested in, but that's how I was trained. And it was, when I heard about collaborative, it sounded like a good idea, and I started to get information about it and understood it, and went to several meetings, over at Neil's office initially, and we
Mhm.
used to sit around and chat about collaborative back in the day. Uh, and from there, it just kind of became a part of my practice.
Wow. Wow. And what didn't you, what about it? Like you said, you litigated. How is that, how has your practice been including collaborative? Because litigation is tough. That's a kind of a tough space to practice. Do you still enjoy litigation or how do you balance it?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't do as much litigation as I used to, and I pick and choose what litigation cases I take.
Mhm.
So I would say that even though quote unquote litigate a lot of, I think I also do a fair amount of negotiations that don't
Mhm.
necessarily litigate, or if they do litigate, a lot of times, I find that we're negotiating a resolution. I find critical in terms of practice that it really depends who your counterpart is, or if you
Yeah.
will, adversary, as it was more commonly known. And if I
Mhm.
have a certain type of an adversary or counterpart, whether it's litigation or negotiations, or even collaborative for that matter, I find that there can be a common thread to reach an objective. So I don't litigate as much as I do. I do find, although I do find the challenge of preparing for hearings and exercising your skills as a trial lawyer to be quite a test of your discipline and stamina
Mhm.
and thinking on your feet.
Yeah,
It takes a
for
lot
sure.
out of one, which I choose not to do as much. So I do think, even notwithstanding what work I'm doing that for, I did find that to be to push. It would push me. It pushes me to
Wow,
kind of
interesting.
expand my abilities in that particular area. But now the paradigm shift of dealing with collaborative, and even dealing with what you learn in training as a collaborative lawyer in terms of human nature, whether it be
Yeah.
listening skills, looping back what people tell you, paying attention. Those kinds of things are invaluable in life, but also in interacting with other lawyers, with clients.
Sure, for
And so
sure.
I have found rather that it has helped me in terms of all aspects, not only life, but also my practice, in something that I have been able to get, I believe I've gotten better at, and probably can continue to.
That's it. Well, they're very transferable skills and, that really you can, apply to all aspects of practice in life. And
Mhm.
that's really fantastic. It just helps us communicate better and relate better and
Yes,
understand.
absolutely.
Um, and you also are a judge. Did I get that right?
You,
Judge
I am,
Marcus?
I am a judge in Mount Kisco. I'm a local court judge. I'm been doing that for about 3.5 years. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, it's a responsibility I deal with mostly, and I'd rather say we, because there's a whole litany of people. There's my
Yeah.
clerk and a whole team of people that are involved
Yeah.
in this process, including the attorneys. And you're dealing with people that are charged mostly with misdemeanors, but you also have jurisdiction over felony matters before they're indicted. So
Wow.
I get to see a lot of different things that go on, um, you know, that you normally wouldn't see,
Yeah.
in everyday life. So,
Right. And
I like it, doing it. It's an honor and a privilege, and I take, it's a good thing for me at this point in my career.
that's great. And I'm sure some of your collaborative skills really lend itself in a really positive way to your skills as a judge, just active listening and understanding and relating in that way.
It does, because there are a lot of times when you're dealing with lawyers that are, trying to advocate their views, and they feel very passionate about what they're doing. And I admire that, particularly if they've done their homework.
Right.
And I will use those skills to, often to try to bridge a gap, whether it,
Wow.
I mean, in terms of trying to help people come to resolution. We also deal with landlord tenant cases, which, is always challenging, because you have competing interests between a private property owner trying to keep, trying to
Right.
get rent on a property they own. I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm talking about even like maybe a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 family house, and a person that doesn't have enough money to pay the rent, or there
Mhm.
are other circumstances why they have to leave, and you're dealing with these social issues of, so, you
It's on top of
negotiating, and
that.
use these skills I've used the skills
Yeah.
that I've learned through collaborative and other thing to try to bridge a gap, rather than just have a final determination, so that they can make, as we've talked about, they can make the decision if
That's
reasonably
right.
possible, you know.
That's right.
So yes, the little difference is that I can use a little bit of the power of my position
You're the judge.
to try to encourage them nicely,
Yes. Yes.
but I
You have
use the
that authority.
concept that, do you want me to decide? And
Yeah.
not tipping my hand,
Right. I see.
I say, well,
Yeah.
would you two like to figure this out, knowing that you both are going to bear a risk if you do that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so interesting because your collaborative training, the whole idea is to avoid having to go to a judge. And here you're, as the judge, applying the skills to litigants to help them reach a resolution, coming from both ends of it. It's really fascinating.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, really interesting. How did you even want to become a lawyer? Like what did you have any role models growing up?
I can't say I did. I don't know if this is a good or not such a good thing, but I kind of was I think I had this reputation even as a youngster, even, when I was 5, 6, 7, even growing, of being a little bit of a contrarian.
Really?
Among my family, at the dinner table, you would pick a point, and I don't know why I did this. I mean, I can't tell you why, but I would often, even if I thought you were right, I might disagree with you. So, and I
Interesting.
used to like to engage in reasoning and logic to advance a view. And so I think my parents always felt that this job was I was suited for this kind of job. So
That's
I
right.
believe they influenced me, whether or not it was totally my decision. I was very much influenced by my family and extended family that this is what you should do, Tony. Because
Well, it sounds like it was a natural fit though. If you had that
yeah,
natural
no,
skill
it
set
was,
and
it
you like to
was,
do
yeah.
that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it was.
Yeah.
But
And
as you
as a
go
judge,
through the practice, you learn that you can't be as idealistic as you are when you first enter it. But
right.
but you try to learn. You learn as you
But
go on.
and you enjoy it. It sounds like you enjoy the work. So
I do
that's
enjoy.
also really important to really, it resonates with your skill sets and gives you purpose and you feel like you're giving a service. I mean, you're going into a service profession where you're and it's and you're as a peacemaker, and a conflict resolution and using your legal skills to help. And that's and you're interacting with real people. You see results. It's that relationship and seeing the effects of that must be very gratifying to
It
see that.
is. It is. It is. I mean, I'll share with you though. I mean, because I know you asked me about getting involved in
Yeah,
collaborative. If I
yeah,
may share
yeah,
with you, I think it
yeah,
was
yeah. Please,
one of
please
my
do. Yeah.
first collaborative cases. I believe it might have been the first, and it was a relatively easy case from the point of view is that it was a relatively young marriage, no children. I represented the husband, and I thought they were married maybe 5 years, maybe they're 4 years, something like that. And they may have been together beforehand. And we did this collaborative case, and there wasn't a heck of a lot to decide, but there were some things to decide.
Right.
Okay. And I think it was at the second meeting that the the wife was the one that was the impetus for ending the marriage. And so my client was hurt and disappointed
Yeah.
and saddened, and these were relatively younger individuals, maybe in their late 20s, early 30s, so to speak. And I remember somehow, I don't remember exactly how we accomplished this. They were literally, when we were at the meeting, they were sitting across from each other. And my counterpart and I were sitting across from each other. And I think he started to tear up or something like that. And she
Mm.
related to him about, I think he said that I miss when we would do our fall cleanup and I miss raking leaves with you. Okay. And he was in teary-eyed, and she's sitting across the way from him. And she literally took her hand and reached it out and put her hand on his.
Oh my God.
And we settled that case that afternoon.
Wow.
And
Wow,
maybe
Tony.
that was a very fortunate, maybe it was
But
I
that
was
was a
able to have
moment.
that
That
as an
was
early
wow.
case. Maybe the fact that it wasn't overly difficult, kind of, I was like, I remember we were trying to employ techniques to try to get them,
Right.
remember why you first met or whatever it was that we were able to do. And obviously these two people had a certain amount of compassion for each other still, and they were able to show
Wow.
it. So
Wow.
anyway, that was,
That's really
that
touching.
was far from anything that I ever
That's
experienced.
amazing. Well, it was a safe space. You created like this space for them to kind of reach get to an understanding and having that empathy without, and getting to having that empathy and treating each other with a dignity and
Yes.
grace. And
Yeah.
that's just really beautiful. You don't
Yeah,
see
I
that.
think him when he got that kind of compassion from his
Yeah,
soon-to-be ex-wife, it
it
comforted
just,
him and helped
it
him to
did.
move on. Because I think he was reluctant to agree to something,
Yeah, right,
monetarily that he would have to do, and he
right,
didn't want to do it. But then once that, he's okay.
right.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Tony. That was
Of course.
really, I can see that being very touching and memorable, and
Yeah,
really, you think about that and
of
why we
course.
do this work. And I'm sure that they were very grateful for the service that you provided in that way, and
Yes.
to get that closure and to get to be able to move forward in the best possible way. And but the work that we do is really hard. Sometimes it's not so easy like that. And I'm
Absolutely.
wondering, what do you do for, off duty to just kind of de-stress or unpack the day, so to speak, and, you know,
Well, I
take
do a
care of
lot of,
yourself?
I do a few things. I mean, firstly, not every morning, but virtually every morning, I do a reading. I do a little bit of a reading, and I do a meditation every morning,
Oh, that's
virtually every
great.
morning. Usually during the week, maybe not always on the weekends. I think maybe sometimes I should do it all the time, but generally speaking, like I did it this morning, not lengthy. But I had practiced some meditation off and on for a while, but I do more of it now on a regular basis. And I find that in my readings, I find that helps me set perspective for my day in terms of trying to zoom out from the challenges that I have ahead of me, because I have a busy mind and it thinks a lot about, what I have to
Yeah.
do and how am I going to resolve this, and, so on and so forth, and how am I going to deal with this stressor. And when I kind of zoom out in the morning to try to prepare myself, for the workday, it gives me a chance to take perspective of, what's in front of me in life as a general matter, and the gift of life, and
Oh,
try not to be so focused on, one, I'm not indispensable. And two, and two,
right.
like take it with a grain of salt, and you do the best you can, and you give it, and you just try to, you go with
Yeah.
it. So I do that, which is helpful. I
That's
have,
wonderful. That's
yeah,
really great. That's great
yeah,
to have that.
that helps me somewhat.
That's really good. And it just gives you, just to to center yourself and to gain a better perspective. Because your
Mhm.
mind could be so, it could really be sabotaging and overwhelming.
Yes,
And to have
absolutely.
that quiet space. Yeah. Listen, I'm all for that. I just came back from a yoga retreat weekend with my sisters, and it was nice to just reset and just to be and just to clear. And
Yes,
because it's hard. You're really you're being asked to, be part of a really, and to help couples, in the matrimonial area at least, and or whatever area that you're going to be practicing. And it's just a really traumatic event in their life, and you're coming in and with all this chaos and trying to help them reach a resolution, and you have to be centered and steady. And sometimes that's not easy to do, because there's so much emotions and so much things that you can be taking in, that
absolutely.
is hard. So that's a great
Mm,
practice. That's
yeah,
really great.
yeah.
So and I know that you also bike,
I
right?
do. I bicycle. I'm not as avid in the winter or the cooler months
Yeah.
as I used to be when I was younger, but I bicycle a fair amount. I was a member of the Westchester Cycle Club. I still am, but I used to be very active in that group. I was a board member of that organization for some
Wow.
time. And then and I used to bike with the organization. Now I do more bike rides on my own, but I bike ride. I like biking in you have to be careful because in safety, but I like biking on quiet roads. And I find that I find it's somewhat meditative actually,
It
because once
is.
you get into a pace and
Yeah.
and you're clipped to your bike, and you're kind of like after the first 15 minutes of not thinking about all the things that you generally think about in life, you get into this mode. I get
Yeah.
into
You
this
get into
mode.
a zone.
And it's
Yeah.
similarly somewhat meditative. And if you're in nature on a quiet road
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah. I
yeah,
totally see that.
right. And
Yeah.
then Ken and I and a whole bunch of
I know
people.
you do that hiking. You
Every
do that.
so often, I don't do it as much lately because it's a big swath of time on Saturday morning, but I hand it off to Ken and all the others that, put that together. It's nice to get together. It's, the distinction from biking is that when you do the hiking, you're in nature, and you also, I find that when you hike with a group of people, you establish a bond with them. There just seems to be something in nature that lends itself to being able to communicate in a manner that's calmer, I think, and more open.
Yeah,
And
for
so I,
sure.
I do like, I haven't been doing it as much. I did it more in the COVID when it was hard to do anything. And that was a way to interact in a less dangerous setting. But I do that on occasion. And
That's really nice.
so
Yeah.
those are some of the things I do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just coming back, when I go to this place, this yoga retreat, there's also hiking there. And what they talked about too, like you have these hikes that you don't even speak or you have times to speak. And when you're one with nature and just to learn even how the trees even communicate to each other and how like the plants like support each other, it's this whole universality, this whole community. It's a world way beyond our own. It makes you feel like, just puts everything in perspective and we're all connected
It
and how we're
does.
all supporting each other. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can definitely appreciate that.
I know you can, Melissa. I
Yeah,
know you
yeah,
can.
yeah. And it's nice that you allow and give yourself time in that space to do these things because some people
Mhm.
don't. And to be mindful of that and to be intentional is pretty great. That's really
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
Yeah, so in terms of the NYCP, or even before that, in terms of divorce, just divorce in general, is there a tip that comes to mind that, in your years of practice? Because you've been doing this for how long has it been? 30? Like
Yeah,
how
it's
many
about 30
years?
years. Yep.
Wow, it's a long time. Is there like a number one tip that comes to mind in your years of experience in working with literally hundreds of thousands of people, or how many that you've helped? It's probably been
Well,
about that.
I mean, there are a lot of things you need to do well, but I mean, you need to work on. But I think, I mean, you have to, I find, um, I think coming back to what we've already talked about, being a good listener, not only with your client to really try to understand what they're trying to achieve, being a good listener with with the other lawyers, or if it's collaborative with the professionals,
Right.
being able to really take in what, you know, people want to be heard and I want to be heard. And I find that you have to really work at that. And when you're and I find that as you go through experiences in life and learn more, I'm better than I used to be, okay, at tolerating, let's say someone that's kind of getting a little bit on my case a little bit, that I
Right.
might be triggering for me,
Right.
in collaborative, it could be collaborative, could be in an adversarial case, could be in
Right.
anything,
Right.
and being able to kind of, you know, I mean, I'll give you, like, even in life, sometimes if I'm having a conversation with a family member and they'll seem annoyed about something and they'll tell me, why didn't you do this or why don't you do that? And I'll say, you seem to be annoyed with me about, something. Why is that? Or what's
Right.
going on? And that doesn't always work, but sometimes it does.
It does.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so in other words, my point is that I think that you have to work hard. You have to put the time in. You have to understand your cases. You have to understand your individuals, but you have to have an ability to really hear what other people have to say. So if most of our cases are going to result in settlements, even in the litigation arena or the negotiated settlement arena, you have to be able to hear what the other person has to say. There's a lot to be said about understanding your counterpart's view, their alignment with their client,
Yeah.
what's going on, and be able to understand it without, without comment or judgment for some to hold it.
Right.
And
Right.
then to try to say to yourself, okay, this is what's going on. Can I work with this in some way? Can I understand where they're
Yeah.
coming from? And a lot,
That's
because I
right.
think a lot of times we may misunderstand or misconstrue.
That's
I may
right.
misunderstand or misconstrue something.
That's right.
And I
Yeah.
didn't have that patience as a younger person,
Yeah.
and I might have been triggered more easily.
Yeah.
And I still may be to some degree, and maybe as I get older, be
Well,
less
we're
so.
not well, we're not perfect, but you don't make any assumptions. Like, what did you mean by that? It's always, it's just checking in. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And just taking that extra step of like confirm, like, do I understand that? Do I understand what you're saying? Or what does that matter to you?
Right.
What's going on
Right.
is could be really yield to a lot more opportunities for resolution
Right.
rather than getting stuck in this conflict or making an
Right.
assumption that this person is
Right.
this or that.
Or trying to be right. Like,
That's right.
you
That's
know,
right.
I know
That's
I'm
right.
right about this. I'm certain.
That's
So I
right.
need
Letting
the
that
other
go.
person to know that I'm right.
Yeah, letting that go.
Which
And
is
it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I get it.
absolutely.
It is hard.
Mhm.
I think it's harder with family members personally. I can do it better with people who I don't know, but family is a little rough because
Yes,
it's
well, we have more
and
invest.
then and that's why I have the empathy for a lot of for the clients that we work with because it's like really, really hard. It's not easy
That's
when
a
you
good
have that
point.
emotional connection. Emotions are irrational. They're like they're triggering and it's easier to do it when you don't have that connection. And I can do
Yes.
it, but it's hard, but it's
Right.
a skill set. And we're
Right.
modeling, right? We can only do what we can do. But if we can make just one difference, one understanding, there's a pathway opened,
Yeah.
which is pretty unbelievable. So in terms of I always ask people, what like if you have like a signature dish or a last meal that you cooked because I'm
Mhm.
maybe compiling an NYCP cookbook because we do have a lot of creative talented cooks in our
Yeah.
association. We
Yes.
really
I'm
do.
not, I'm not I think when I cook, it's not very elaborate. It's usually very simple. I like to buy the best ingredients
So
or the
that's
best.
number one. That's
Right.
a good cook right there. Get the
Okay.
best quality
Well,
ingredients.
what
You're
have you?
halfway
I
there.
mean, so I mean, I don't, I'm not at this point, I'm not usually preparing for tons of people, although I am hosting Passover, but
You
uh,
are. Oh,
yes, I
that's
am.
great. How many
But I've
people?
recruited a whole litany of people to assist
Oh,
me.
you're well,
Yeah, I'm
you're
using
you're
my
really great.
management
Now,
skills more than my cooking
you're
skills.
an amazing manager. I have to say that for anyone who doesn't know Tony, Tony is an amazing leader. You're great at delegating and leading meetings, and
Melissa,
you're
thank you.
really
That's
excel.
okay.
And you're good about it. Like you want to do it. It's not like you do
Yeah,
it in a very kind way.
yeah.
So you
Well,
delegated Passover.
I
So how
delegated. I'm not really
how
cooking.
many people do you have like
I'm
bringing
about,
stuff?
I think it grew a little bit. 13, 14, something like that. I
Wow,
don't know.
okay, that's a
Give
pretty
or
big
take.
number
I can't remember
at your home.
exactly.
At your home?
At my home. Yep.
Wow,
At my home. I
wow,
have my sister, my nephews, my son, a friend
that's
or
great.
two, what
That's
have
great.
you.
That's
Friend
great.
of mine gave me a shank bone today, because
That's
I always,
great.
so because a roasted shank bone. So, whatever.
Yeah,
I have trouble
and you
finding.
got and Tony, you were bar mitzvahed later in life. I
That's
remember that.
correct.
Yes, like about 15 years ago, was it?
Yes, approximately. Yes. I wasn't bar
Yes,
mitzvahed as a youngster. So I returned in a b'nai mitzvah, it was more
right.
than one person being bar mitzvah at the same time in the plural. Yes, about a month after my son. I was,
Wow, I do remember that. I do.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. That
So
was a
so what
wonderful experience.
so what are you cooking? What is your dish
So
for
if I do
Passover?
cook, which isn't as much lately because I pretty much am pretty busy, and
I
I
know you
probably
are.
should cook. I like to cook salmon. I like to cook a salmon dish. I either use a mustard sauce that I try to remember because I haven't done that in a while. I mix a little honey, a little mustard,
Oh,
certain kind of
that's nice.
mustard. I put a couple I forget the other ingredients that I put in, and I just usually I like to grill it when it's not too cold out if I can.
Right.
It's usually, a fillet, not steaks usually. And I
Yeah.
usually, sometimes I use if I want it to be easy, I put a little teriyaki sauce on it, which is,
Wow. Okay.
and I find, a lot of, if somebody, I can cook that in a half hour, I mean, whatever, it doesn't take long to cook that. Usually a vegetable, steamed broccoli, maybe lightly sauteed with garlic and oil, a little bit of olive
Wow.
oil, a little bit of fresh garlic. If I don't, I'll have the jar. If I didn't have the fresh garlic, I'll usually buy
Okay.
the jar.
Oh,
Some people don't like garlic, so you gotta have to check in
yeah.
with that.
You do have to check in. Yeah.
And then a good salad. I have a couple of, I mean, I'll maybe make a salad. Try to get away from the starches when you're trying to, keep your weight down. I mean, I do make a potato here and there. So I'm not a
It's
casserole
simple.
person or a,
Yeah, just very simple. I
yeah,
I
pretty
like it.
simple, good ingredients,
That's all you
couple of
need. That's all
items,
you need.
make the table look nice, good
Good.
presentation. And
I think you're halfway. That's great. That's a great aesthetic. I love it.
thank
Anyway, so in terms of an NYCP experience, do you have a favorite one that you wanted to share?
that's a tough question. It depends, there are a couple different things I can think of when you ask me that, Melissa. I mean, I can think of, I, I, I liked going to when we used to do the IACP trips. I remember
Yes.
one time we did a Chicago trip and there was about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 of us, whatever, that were at the dancing party on Saturday night. And it just, for some reason, that clicked. We were all having such a good time,
Oh, that's wonderful.
I just remember because it was under a tent outside under a tent and the music was great. And I just felt such a camaraderie from a social
Yeah.
setting. from a learning setting, I've enjoyed many of the trainings. Hoffman, David Hoffman,
Oh, he's wonderful.
the one
Yeah.
he did on Zoom, which I think is a very challenging thing to do. Um, on implicit bias, I thought was
Yes.
wonderful. But I also think, now being involved with you on, the last training that we did, when you do something yourself and you put it together, and we did the training, that we're doing on the,
The
collaborative
skills.
cases and the practice series. So, there's so many, the time we used to go to Abby's house, and a group of us used to go there, the practice group, and we would go, and about 15 of us or 10 of us, and each bring a dish, speaking of cooking, right?
Yeah.
And
Those
we
were
would sit
nice.
together. And I guess the point is that the NYACP individuals, I mean, even if I didn't do collaborative, it's wonderful to be part of this group, because the individuals that I know throughout are just genuinely decent, good people. Many
That's
of them,
nice.
many of them are obviously present company included. And and I so I just, the answer to the question is just probably how fortunate I am to have found such a wonderful,
Oh,
caring
that's
group of
wonderful.
hardworking, intelligent people to be able to spend some time with and work with. So,
Well, that's
it's a
wonderful.
tough question to answer. Those are just a,
But well, that's also life's all about, you just everyone is just wanting that connection and to feel, a sense of, mattering, to matter and to really appreciate to be among like-minded professionals who share the
Mhm.
same kind of goals that they have with practice and training and just being nice to be around, being likable and to like somebody and to connect with them. It's like a nice
Helps.
thing. It
Yep.
does help. It does help. So I always end, Tony, with where you hope to be in 10 years and what do you hope for collaborative practice?
Well, I mean, I don't have any plans to really retire from at this
Really?
point. Yeah, I do not. I think I would probably be more of a mixture of work and travel
Yeah.
in 10 years. I mean, God willing, if I continue my ability to do this at a high level, if that wasn't coming into question, then I might change that view. But
Well,
or
it keeps you sharp, keeps you sharp.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I
just,
understand. So I do think it keeps me sharp. I do enjoy working to a degree. So I don't see there's a gentleman down the hall in my office. I mean, I don't even mind mentioning. His name is Dan Hollis. He happens to be a local attorney,
oh,
and yeah,
he's
and
been around for a while.
Dan is, I don't know, in his early 80s. We run into each other. The guy is sharp as a tack. I should only, and I don't know, so I don't know if I'm looking up to be him, but I think I would want to, I've already developed a little bit more of a balance. As much as I work now, I do tend not to work as much as I used to.
Well, that's good. That's
And
good.
so I would think a more work-life balance, more travel, more time with my significant other, Karen. We spend some time together, and so
That's nice.
that, and as far as the NYACP or collaborative, I would like to see hopefully an umbrella group in the New York State. I would like to
Oh,
see
that's great.
UCLA
Yes.
passed, and I would like to see the court system get better at having people, if not the court system, but the system, get better
Yeah.
at somehow encouraging people for alternative dispute resolution, mediation, even though it's there now and it's much better than it's ever been, but it could be much better.
Yeah.
Particularly in New York State, where things don't move as quickly as we'd like them to for various
For
reasons.
sure. For sure. Well, those are all great goals. And I think having a statewide organization, having, more cooperation with the courts and implementation and getting collaborative out there. And for you, having a better, having balance, but still working because you still enjoy it. And that's
I
a
do.
passion.
I
And
do.
that's really wonderful. Well, this has been great, Tony. I've so enjoyed learning a little bit more about you, even though we know each other. I always learn something new, and it's been great. And hopefully, the people who are watching will learn a little bit more about you too, and the work that you do. And if people want to find you, you have a website, and you're also on the NYCP website.
Yeah,
But what's your
yeah.
website? It's Marcus and
MS.
Sheridan.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. mslawny.com is probably.
Oh, that's
Okay,
it.
but if you
Okay.
Google Marcus and
Yeah.
Sheridan, I think it will come
Yeah.
up. Marcus is with a K, Markus, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
it usually comes up. Yeah, and then we're in Mount Kisco, and we're, you know where we are, so
Yeah,
we're
that's
northern
great.
Westchester, and we're on Zoom.
And you're on Zoom.
So we're
You're everywhere.
ubiquitous, right?
Yeah, that's right. You're everywhere. Well, this has been wonderful, Tony. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Good
you,
luck with your
Melissa.
Seder tonight. I hope it all goes well. And thank
You
you.
too. Thanks so
Take
much
care.
for asking me to join you. Okay.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay.